Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 5 of FRAC, the Lunch and Learn session for the pre-award group. Today's session is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be an open forum. So I am here to help moderate, but I'm going to depend on you all to kind of provide that level of interaction so we can learn from each other. My name is Stephanie Rodriguez-Macluf. I'm the Assistant Director of the Central Proposal Office. We're centralized system at UCF. We're in the central office. And I am joined by some of my colleagues who are going to support the conversation as we move forward. And we put together kind of a list of prompts that we can use as we, jump from subject to subject, just to help get the juices flowing. I want to remind all of you that this session is being recorded. You can feel free to unmute yourselves and speak up whenever you have a response you'd like to add to the group. All right, so let's get started. We put this list of kind of prompts together to help us think about things we'd like to talk about, things of interest. So you can just kind of read through it. And if something tickles your fancy, bring it up and we can start a conversation. I'm going ahead and start off with number 1 on this list. And let me know if you'd like to contribute or just unmute yourself. How does your institution handle encouraged but not required cost share? Do you have a policy? So just to start off, over at UCF, we view encouraged very similarly to required, in that encouraged gives the sense that cost share is going to aid or benefit the review of the proposal. So while UCF as an institution does not provide voluntary cost share, or we institutionally do try to avoid voluntary cost share, when we see the word encouraged, it kind of puts it more in the court of, okay, this is something that is going to benefit the proposal. It's going to give it extra points. So we view it similarly to required cost share. And that's how we work with it. Any contributions from the room?
Hey. Obviously I'm at UCF now, so that's very similar, but my old institution, we thought of it the same way. If it said encouraged, we sort of took that to mean like they want that, so we need to do that. So yeah, we wouldn't have looked at that as voluntary by any means.
What was your previous institution, Ashton?
Nemours Children's Hospital.
Thank you. Anybody else? Or how does your institution treat cost share in general? Do you allow it if it's voluntary? Do you not allow it?
Hi, this is Barb Bittner from Creighton University in Omaha. I would say we actively discourage cost share that isn't required. If they decide to move ahead with it, we bring it to the attention of the chairs and the deans and the provosts, just to make sure they understand that this was not required, but was offered up voluntarily.
Okay. Yeah, while UCF does not allow voluntary cost share, there is a process to request for special circumstances or a waiver to that policy. All right, I'm going to move on to number 2. Does your institution have an internal proposal submission timeline or rule? If yes, what is it and what are your likes and dislikes? Once again, I'll start off by talking about UCF. We have a 5-day rule, and that's for our central office. We are a centralized system, so our units and departments often have also an extension to that. So they may have a 10-day rule. In the central office, when we're reviewing proposals, we need them 5 full business days ahead of time in order to provide an initial review within 48 hours. We turn it around back to them and then expect the final review or the final piece, the final proposal back to us 48 hours before the deadline. And that allows us time to provide a final review, ask additional questions or request additional changes if necessary, and then submit well before the deadline, hopefully. Do we have anything different from the group? Feel free to turn your cameras on too. We're not trying to save bandwidth in this room. No videos here.
Stephanie. Hi, this is Celeste Schock. I'm from UCF as well. I just wanted to add on one thing that I do like about our policy, which generally is a 5-day rule. One thing I like too is that if it's a mail-in hard copy, we require 8 days ahead of time so that we can prepare for the hard copy documents to go out. And I do like that because I've had to do a few of those in the last year. So that's nice.
Yeah, we also, hello, this is Yelena Chadester from UCF too. We also have a rule for the pre-proposals, which require budget or do not require budget or require AOR submission. So if there is no budget and require AOR submission or signature, we always ask for at least 3 days for review of the pre-proposals.
And that brings up another great a great kind of subsection of this question. Pre-proposals, how do you treat them? Do you require them to be submitted in advance? When do you need to review them? Elena brought up a great point that over at UCF, if it has an AOR signature or if it has a detailed budget or cost share, it gets routed through us, through our research system Huron. If it does not require a signature and it does not require a budget, it gets submitted by the PI, but we require, or we don't require actually, but we encourage a statement to be included in the documentation that it is not a proposal and all final proposals would have to come from the Office of Research.
Yeah, and I can speak to my old institution. We actually did not have an internal proposal submission timeline, which made things really overwhelming. My personal little department, we started implementing one because we were all sort of losing our minds, but I sort of worked more on the department side, not really the central office. Our central office didn't have a timeline and honestly really could never review things until the day of because they got so many last minute submissions that they were very overwhelmed. So it's such a change coming to UCF where there is strict deadlines, strict everything, whereas Nemours was sort of, I made this and hopefully they'll stick to it. Same with pre-proposals. If we sort of did the same thing, if it required a budget or a signature, we had to look at it. Otherwise, they could just submit it on their own. And again, there was no timeline for that. So sometimes we would get them day of.
Is there anyone here who's had to or experienced implementing or instituting a policy for the timeline and what that's been like and how long it took for your your PIs to kind of jump on board and start following that timeline?
Just sort of going back, when we did sort of implement our own timeline, we kind of got lucky. We had a lot of new PIs. So a lot of it was their first time submitting. So I would just tell them like, it needs to be done by this day, no later. And they didn't really ask too many questions. We had a few senior PIs. Some of them were more receptive than others. Some of them were like, yeah, that will reduce my stress too. And others were like, yeah, that's never going to happen. So I was like, cool, great talk.
Does anybody else have anything to contribute? I think we implemented our 5-day rule a number of years ago. I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago. Actually, maybe less. So correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who knows.
It was in
and
2018, I believe.
2018, okay. So about 4 years ago. And I know that it took a bit for everyone to get on board. And it took years actually to really start ironing out, you know, to catch those people who don't submit all the time and to get, you know, everyone kind of on the same system and understanding why and where and how and all of these things. And even now there are outliers, but it does take a while. It takes a minute for everyone to kind of get on the same page as far as implementing that kind of a policy. Coming from UCF with, you know, which is, we have a lot of proposal submissions. We have a very active faculty. So the expectation there should be a gradual kind of understanding up to that policy and not the expectation that it's going to happen overnight. But the effort has to be there as well to kind of just keep pushing, keep communicating, keep educating. The more the better if you want to get that kind of on board as fast as possible. And it does help. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. Oh, Ashton, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I just said, I think it's also really helpful too, when like the higher ups are also on board with implementing policies like this. Like, again, at my old institution, they supported us, but they didn't really give any muscle behind it. So when the higher ups are really on board with it, I think it helps everybody learn a lot faster too.
Oh gosh, it's tremendously helpful, especially for research administrators and quality of life. So to have that backing, I think is really tremendously, it's just a blessing. It's wonderful. Okay. Number 3, how do you motivate faculty to meet internal deadlines? This is kind of piggybacking on to our previous topic. For those of you who are working directly with faculty, how do you get them to submit things on time? No takers? All right, I'm going to move on. Managing limited submissions. What is your institution's process? Does anyone in the group use a software system to manage those limited submissions? Or are they done in the departments? Are they done in the colleges?
Hi, it's Barb Bittner again. At Creighton, I send out the information about the limited submission. We have anyone who's interested, let us know. If we have too many, you know, if we have more than the number that it's allowed, we have them send us their just kind of their elevator pitch. And then that goes to the provost. She then usually convenes a committee to see who will move forward. And then we let the faculty know.
Okay.
And we're in central pre-award.
Okay. At UCF, our limited submissions are handled by our research development office, and we do use a software system called InfoSec to route those. And once they're routed, there's a deadline, and if there's only so many, there's enough to move forward, then those are automatically moved forward. But if there is a competition, then they convene a panel and they do a review, and then the outputs get relayed to the PIs.
Looks like there's some comments in the chat. Approval from the Dean of Research is required.
Okay.
I wanted to say I do like to with UCF that the PI is notified and the department, but so are the specialists. So we know ahead of time and we can put them in our portfolios, like what's coming up, even though it's not even in the system yet. So it's a good heads up.
Yeah, we also require units to attach this approval to the proposal record so that it is for the records in case if anyone in post-award have a question or contract team would just need to see if there is an approval for the limited submission. Or sometimes when there is PI goes through the limited submission and the other PI did not and both submitted, usually that would be a determinant who will be submitting application at the end and whose application would be withdrawn from the sponsor.
Stephanie Jones mentioned we have a limited submission committee that will convene to review the pre-proposals following review of the guidelines. The committee will provide a recommendation to the Vice President of Research, who makes the final decision regarding the internal competition. Very nice. Okay. What are sponsor-specific sticking points for guideline compliance? What have you seen in your review of proposals and guidelines that you find to be really important items to pay attention to, and for what sponsors? I think traditionally speaking, obviously, indirect costs is a huge one to pay attention to, making sure that it's allowable, what rates are allowable, if you can use your federally negotiated rate, cost share as well. But that's just across the board. Anything more sponsor specific?
I know I work a lot with NIH, so just making sure that they've got their set of like page limits and whatnot, formatting issues, but some special RFAs will come up that will change those. So like an R01 research strategy is usually 12 pages, but then sometimes it'll be like, actually for this proposal, it's only 9. And so that I always have to like double check everything when it comes to them, because they'll just change it randomly for specific RFAs.
Good point.
I was going to speak to something similar with NSF with their the number of pages and the broader impact section, results from NSF support, even the use of et al. In their references, but there's so many things that they'll kick it back for without review. So there's a lot with NSF.
Oh, and DoD, when the way they make you name the attachments, always makes me nervous that I'm gonna like, oh, if it's like attachment 01, I'm like, nope, can't have that. So
Right.
just really specific requirements for some of those.
Has anyone noticed a tightening up of return without reviews, for example, or issues coming from proposals being submitted that include things that may have been fine before, but you're noticing are not going through as well these days? Prior NSF support, I know that we had something bounce recently. It wasn't an RWR, but I think that it was, they reached out to us because something was missing in a prior NSF for support section of a PD.
I know that for some time now, NSF is very strict with the progress report. And if one of the PIs or co-PIs who is delinquent, it doesn't matter what proposal it is, and they submit proposal, they actually return it without review just because of one co-PI. So, and also for NIH, I know it's very important to make sure at the very end of the application, to make sure when you select the institute within the NIH, which you want this proposal to go to, if you select the one that is not participating in FOA, it would be returned without review.
Good information.
Piggybacking on the NIH, when I worked at NYU, we actually got quite a few notes on our bio sketches. People would put, you know, too many references or whatnot, and we did end up getting a letter saying next time we're just returning it. So we got at NYU, we got really strict about bio sketches.
Okay. All right, number 6, ever-changing world of sponsored guidelines. How to best help PIs to adapt to the changes. Has anyone experienced any issues with this? I've reviewed so many proposals that were submitted by PIs who told me when asked to change something or revise something that this is the way they've always done it, so it's fine. Or they haven't submitted in a long time and things have changed, and maybe, you know, again with the NSF and the broader impacts as well as the intellectual merit, sometimes it's required, some years it's not required. So just paying close attention to that and getting the PIs on board. It's not such an effort, but it happens a lot. It happens all the time.
Yeah, this is Barb Bittner again. We're having some challenges right now with the new NIH BioSketch format. People are not realize we've sent out, I send things out, so I'm kind of the communications person for our office, and we send out things to PIs, we send them to their admins. We had a webinar session about it. We've sent out newsletters. It's just, at some point, it's just, you have to tell them when they submit something through your office that this is no longer correct and you need to, these are the changes you need to make. Sometimes that one-on-one interaction is a little more successful for us than all the webinars in the world can be, unfortunately.
Ain't it the truth? It's so effective reaching someone. I mean, unfortunately, it takes 100% more time, but reaching out to people as things as they come in to the person specifically about their specific document, it's always going to be more beneficial and really hit harder than through the webinars and the emails, because they're just so busy. They're just too busy. They can't get to it all. So taking those opportunities, I really commend, those of you who take those opportunities as teaching moments whenever you can. It's such hard work and it really takes up a big part of your day, but those are the times that it really sinks in. How many of you all do your institutions support the PIs to create their bio sketches and current and pendings, or do you expect them to do it on their own? I think at UCF, it depends on the department, but I think a lot of our departments are offering quite a bit of support to those kind of documents in the proposal package.
The PI or the department will normally put those types of things together, but by the time it gets to our central office, they run a query just to make sure everything that needs to be there is there.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Barb again. We have 3 people in our central office, so we have to let the PIs do their own other support and bio sketches. We do have a health sciences library that can help some of our faculty with that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's up to the PI and their admins.
Okay, this is a hot topic, especially UCF. How does your institution handle out of sequence awards? And by out of sequence, we mean awards that are received following the submission of a proposal that didn't go through your institution, that was submitted outside of the institution, maybe directly by the PI. I second that, Stephanie. How do you all handle that? We have developed sort of a policy. It's a working policy. We're working on it currently, where we are requiring a waiver to our institutional policy that states basically that all proposal submissions have to run through our Office of Research by our authorized signatories per Florida statute. And so when we have these unauthorized proposals go out, in order for them to move forward to award, we have this waiver process, and they have to be granted a waiver and approval before they're even considered to be negotiated and obviously set up for award.
We have something similar, but we also make sure that we inform that PIs, chair and dean and our VPR, just to keep track of who continues to do these types of things. I don't think they realize how much work has to go in to backing in an award when there's no proposal. We don't know if we can even agree to the terms of the award because we weren't a part of the process on the front end. Now, are we going to turn the award down? Probably not, unless there's just something in there that we can agree to, but it's just really, I can't express enough how much I hate when that happens.
Agreed, agreed. It makes everyone's life more difficult. I mean, we have to really, stop everything, start making phone calls, make sure everyone's in the loop, create an action plan. And our waiver process, it does include looping in the ADR, the Associate Dean for Research, the chair, having an action plan created to make sure that it doesn't get repeated, and so forth. So it's very similar to what you all do. And I'm hoping, I'm hoping that, once enough of these happen, that people start to understand what all goes into it. I mean, it's more work for everyone when this happens, even the PI, and it stalls everything, but they still happen. They still come. Hopefully less and less so in the future. All right, number 8, hot to handle. How do you maximize success when working with a feisty PI? This is for anyone working directly with the PIs, if departmental people, or if you have a decentralized system. What can you do? What can you do when it's difficult to convince people of things, your PI? What can you do when your PI is calling you incessantly? What can you do?
Looks like Erica wrote in the chat, retain control, stick to policy, and be polite.
I love it. Fantastic. Take a step back, take a breath, and just put one foot in front of the other. Retain control, stick to policy, and be polite. That is fantastic. You should put that on a t-shirt.
At my old institution, I worked directly with the PIs, and we had one that was very nervous, but also very sure that he's right. So we ended up having bi-weekly meetings with him over the phone, which was, took time out of our day, but it made things go a lot smoother because he wasn't always asking questions about how we got here. We sort of kept him involved in the process the whole time so that there weren't any surprises and he wouldn't have to change things too much. And he asked a lot of questions, but having the meetings every other week made the amount of questions smaller. And that was the best way we could deal with that.
Well, that's smart. When you have to, being able to accommodate the PI the way that he or she needs to be accommodated, if it's possible, that's just wonderful. Because as we all know, these are their life's work sometimes, and wanting it to have a bit of control is human nature, especially when you're dealing with something that's just so important to you. So, it's within the realm of reason to expect that this comes up, and to be able to accommodate that is great if you can. And if you can't, then, if anybody has any tips or tricks to offer, but I love this. Retain control, stick to policy, be polite. Love it.
I also think that each institution has to have the escalation when, for example, it goes out of hands and you just really can't, and PI is being, not just PI, anyone, who is needing your help, and you pretty much cannot provide what they ask, it should be escalated. So your supervisor should be taking care of it and should basically help you out and have your back on this. Otherwise, if works with one PI, then why not others, to be bully and yelling and screaming.
Yeah, it's true. And if you don't take that opportunity to escalate to meet those needs, it's very possible that your PI will, and perhaps far higher than you would reach. So getting ahead of it and trying to, if you can't satisfy whatever it's, is being asked of you, then move it up. Maybe your boss can. All right, number 9, talk to us about delegation. Any tips? It's such a powerful tool. I try to improve my skills of delegation. It's difficult. I do like a certain level of control, but being able to delegate makes you, you know, an octopus. It makes you able to conquer so many more of your plans and ideas. It also helps you, you know, achieve. It helps you get through your day sometimes when you have just too much and you need help. I mean, that's basically asking for help sometimes, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you are keeping, you know, your institution in mind and your mission and making sure that you're doing the best job you can. Delegation is a wonderful, wonderful tool.
I think it was actually brought up in a session earlier this week about how people were kind of nervous about delegating just because everybody's working so much. So how do you get past the guilt of delegating? But I think it's also important that if you are able to take on anything, to sort of reach out to people that you know might be struggling too. Because people might be afraid to ask for help, but if you're already there offering the help, I think that kind of eases the stress and guilt that people feel too, if you're able.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, and you make such a great point, Ashton. When people reach out to you and offer help, there is something inside of you that just, you know, feels more secure, that feels happier, that feels like someone has your back, that feels like your team is a team and cares about you, and you're not off, you know, in Siberia by yourself because you have your own portfolio and you have to take care of it, or it's not getting taken care of. So having that kind of connection, I think, is so important, and it's so wonderful to take advantage of that and do that for somebody else. All right, burning through them. Number 10, what to do when a PI is constantly updating documents. We could talk about this for days. That can be frustrating. I agree. Just breathe. At the 12th hour. That's right. Or even sometimes the next day, they say, pull it back. I want to change something. Yeah. Well, at UCF, we try to be strict about this. We give them parameters, at least we try to. This is your opening. This is your window. If you want to change things, this is the time to do it. Okay. You can't change things now. Your window has closed. You have to wait. So that would be going through our kind of internal review process where when using Huron, it bounces back between us and the department and the PI, for example, us being in the central office and doing that compliance review. So, you know, when it gets to us in the central office, we don't allow any changes. We don't allow anyone to touch anything. You have to sit on it. That's it. And it's supposed to come to us final. So there is an expectation that when it does get to us 5 days before the deadline, it's final. The only thing we allow the PI to adjust is that statement of work can be adjusted up until about 2 days before the deadline. And so when we send it back, that's the opportunity. That's when the window opens back open. We send it over and we have either, you know, comments or questions or maybe no comments, but then it's in your court. You have the opportunity now to take it, put your changes in that you sat on or that have just come up with the notes that you've been given. And then you can send it back to us for final review and submission. But when it's with us, that's it. That's it, you're done. And when you submit it to us for final review and submission, you are certifying that that proposal is final, no changes, and it's approved for submission. So we really try to make that extremely clear as possible how we work, so that they do take those opportunities to make those changes when they can, when that window is open, and they know that they're only giving it to us when it closes, because it's very possible when they give it back to us for final review and certifying that it's final, it's very possible it's not going to take long to do that final review, and then boom, it gets submitted. So finding or deciding later on that you want to change something doesn't work in the PI's favor. They really have to make sure that everything that's sent to us is ready to go.
I would also suggest making sure that if, especially an after submission change, making sure that it's like a good one. We had somebody, I think it was at my old institution, she wanted to change it because she realized she missed 2 periods in her sentence. And I was like, I don't think that's gonna get thrown out. And this is a lot more work just for the periods. She ended up escalating it and it ended up getting pulled and resubmitted, but really emphasizing, is this gonna be thrown out for this, or is this just a format thing? Or grammar thing, I guess.
Yeah. All right, moving on to number 11, tips for intra-institutional communication with multiple areas of the university to coordinate with. Any tips? Tips for communication between the central office and the departments. Tips for communicating with your proposal group, with your contracts office. Do you have regular meetings? Anything that you put into place to help this process along, to help connect everyone? Well, over at UCF, we have a number of regular meetings that take place with different stakeholders. We have a monthly meeting with our research administration group at UCF, departmental as well as central. Once a month we meet, all the offices give updates, anything pertinent. We also have weekly meetings with our VP, which have been amazing. We started doing that when we all went remote at the beginning of the pandemic, and we've kept doing that till now. We're still doing it. It's just half an hour once a week, and it means the world. It's just a wonderful way to meet. We try to keep it light, but we also give our VP some time to give us important updates and respond to questions. So that's been incredible, especially the past couple of years. I think there we have our research development. I remember seeing Josh Roney speak about how they're also doing monthly meetings to talk about more their end of things. They do that with the departments and colleges and units and centers.
Looks like we have a comment. Not sure if this is what you mean, but when, I just lost it. But if there's multiple PIs, I ask that they designate one point of contact, because I learned the hard way working with multiple people who contradict each other and override some things that others have put in. Relationships are very important. Make sure contacts form good relationships.
I like this. This is a very interesting point about having one point of contact. I haven't dealt with this myself too much being in the central office, but I can imagine how that can be very frustrating if you have multiple people with buy-in kind of sending you adjustments to documents, let's say, or giving you, putting you in different directions. So yeah, one point of contact, that makes a lot of sense.
I agree with the relationship, forming good relationships too. I think it's really important to sort of figure out somebody's communication style. Because I feel like sometimes you want to email, and then you'll get these like kind of direct emails back.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I don't know if my point got across. But then when you talk to them on the phone, everything's wonderful and nice. So
Right.
just trying to figure out who communicates better and what style.
Right. And
I
I like
agree.
that also, taking a step back when you get those emails and they just kind of shake you up, and kind of imagining, I don't think that I'm understanding this the way that it sounds in my head. And maybe picking up the phone, and then you're going to get a much more holistic understanding of that person's communication skills. And it'll all click, but sometimes right off the bat, something can sound a lot worse than it actually is intended to be. Celeste added, take time responding. Absolutely. Sometimes take the night.
I also think it's important to try and, as much as possible, to pick one mode of communication, like we do in our records, because I find it gets to be really messy, especially when you're working with multiple units and you've got, some emails are in the record and some of them are in Outlook, and it's like back and forth and all over the place. So as much as possible, when I'm talking to the units, I try and do everything in the record.
You bet. Absolutely. And get everything on paper. Even if it ends up being a chat. If something important has happened or a decision has been made, make sure you save it. If you get into the habit of saving everything and making sure everything is logged, it will save you so much time down the line. Okay, here's a big one. Renewals, supplements, and continuations. What is what? Who handles these in your offices? Are these proposal matters? Are these award management items? How do you separate them in your office? Well, at UCF, we have our policy that we're following is that renewals and supplements are handled by our proposal group, and our continuations are handled by post-award. And the logic being that with our continuations, budgets have already been decided with that initial proposal submission and award, so there doesn't need a lot of critical review, and it's basically submitting progress reports and typically. So that's done by our award management group, whereas the renewals and supplements are handled by our proposal group, just like a new proposal would be. Okay, Erica's institution, she says that they route differently internally, but pre-award submits them all. Okay. Does anyone have issues in their institution distinguishing between them? Is it a renewal? Is it a supplement? What am I looking at? Is it a new proposal? What IDC should I use? Is this current rates or old rate, or the rates from the original proposal? All right, we have a response from Adelaide. That is the same at University of Miami. Post-award handles the RPPRs or continuations departmentally, but in the central office pre-award applications team submits those with the exception of the final RPPR at NIH. Okay.
I have a question. Would you say that RPPR and continuation can be a term that can be used interchangeably?
I don't deal with RPPRs. These are progress reports.
I know back at my old institution, we sort of used them interchangeably just because we all pretty much dealt with NIH entirely.
Right.
So they're basically the same thing. However, at NYU, you know, we had the RPPR that got submitted through Assist, but with every RPPR that we did, we would have to have a continuation record in our internal system just for our tracking and reporting as well.
I think that's actually how we do it as well. When we submit an RPPR to NIH, for example, we use a Huron system and we record it as a continuation.
Yeah, that's what we did at NYU.
Anything to add about renewals, supplements, and continuations? We're using Huron, so we actually refer to supplements as revisions in our system.
We do that also at I think it starts getting a little tricky when we use the term renewal though.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like with FDOH and things of that nature, their term of renewal is a little different than the NIH term of renewal.
It's true. It's true. I find that to be a big challenge, actually, kind of understanding that the term is used differently by different groups. So we try to base most of our terminology, well, our system actually does, on NIH and the federal sponsors, and how they define a renewal, and also obviously the uniform guidance, a renewal and a supplement and a continuation. But we do find that other sponsors, especially non-federal sponsors, use the same terminology, but not perhaps not how we know them to be used. So it can be confusing. So you kind of have to break it down and say, okay, I know you're showing me this, but I'm actually seeing that, and then route it through your office the way you discern it to be. I know for me, it's very common, even across, with research administration, to hear the word continuation being used as a catch-all for all of these terms, and kind of they've taken time to delve into it and re-educate a bit and show that there is differences between the terminologies, and they're not all continuations, and continuation is a specific thing, which is, incremental funding awards. But so that's been a challenge for me.
I think that's kind of how we separate renewal and continuation. when I'm trying to understand, I used to work in the central office, now I'm departmental. But when I used to work in the central office, that was kind of like my question, like, are you requesting additional funds? If so, then I believe this would be a continuation.
Okay, well, when we talk about continuation at UCF, we're talking about incremental funding awards. So it's actually not new funds. So it would
Okay.
be a proposal, for example, that you proposed a 5-year project, but it's only funded 1 year at a time. And to
Okay.
have those funds released, you have to submit something like a progress report. And that progress report, the submission, that request is called a continuation. So it's in order to continue your project, you have to give them the evidence that everything's going well, and then they release your funds. It's typically not, something that gets denied, but it's just part of the process. So annually, you're requesting to have those funds released.
And I think with the exception of funding, that would be similar kind of to the reporting for NIH.
That was one thing that, we spent a lot of time kind of talking about with our institute, at UCF, what is a continuation versus the others? Continuation typically doesn't mean new money for us, and the others do. So if you're having a revision, that's new money. That's something that you didn't plan for, that, maybe something happened, maybe there was a pandemic. And so, you need something extra for your project to move forward. So you're going to be asking for additional funds to make your project work out. So that for us is new money. And a renewal, like with NIH, your project has ended, and you want to keep going. So maybe you want a phase 2, maybe you want to expand your research, but the initial proposal, the initial agreement has come to a close. That period of performance has ended. So you want to continue it. You're going to build upon that through a renewal to renew the research. That would also be new money at UCF.
So another question, with renewal and no cost extension, what would be kind of some differences between those?
Well, no cost extension is exactly what it is. There's no funding involved in a true no cost extension. You just need more time. So you're saying, I can't get this done in the 12 months I planned. Could I have another 6 months? And they say, sure. And there's no funding attached to that. It just gives you that more time to complete those deliverables and submit those reports. But a renewal is a whole new project. It's got a defined, distinct period of performance. It has a budget. It's brand new, and you have to submit it, and it's basically competing. So you have to submit it, and your sponsor may or may not approve it.
Okay, understood. That clarifies it a bit. Thank you.
Sure. I find this topic to be very confusing and needs a lot of, talking, needs a lot of talking it out, because there are so many scenarios, and you really have to put your heads together to say, okay, we have this, but this, and then there's that, and to take into consideration this. So, as so many things in research administration, it often depends. So, but it can be a fun discussion because, if you like to figure things out like that and delve into it, but it often is a source of confusion. All right, number 13, participant support costs. Let's discuss participant support costs. When are they allowed? Oh, certainly not as often as the faculty want. Ain't it the truth? That's so funny.
I think for the most federal sponsors, it only allows if it is a training grant or a conference grant. But I see a lot of times when PIs are confusing it with the participant incentives, which is completely different. Participant incentives is just incentives for participation, and it should be included in MTDC when the participant support costs are totally excluded. So that's an ongoing battle between, PIs and Research Administration Office, where it's just, they say, no, this is it, a participant support cost. No, it's not.
find there's so much confusion with people putting participant support costs and human subjects in the same box, whereas they're not in the same box. They're different, they're completely different items. While participant support costs are for training, in order to train people, human subjects, as you said, are typically being paid, if they are, in incentives. And that's kind of named differently depending on who's writing the budget. But there's certain, let's say, accepted terminologies for that, participant incentives being one of them. Or maybe someone's filling out a survey or participating in your trial and you're giving them a gift card or $50 or something like that. And that does go into your other direct costs, and you do pull or charge IDC to that.
Well, sometimes also there is like a limitation for the direct costs allowed, and everything else. They also trying to find ways to, to sneak in more costs, direct costs, and less IDC. So this is one of the ways that they found it can work. So we need to be very careful when we review budgets and budget justification.
Yeah, and I find also that if participant support costs are allowable, it's typically stated in the solicitation. It's made very clear. And then there are sponsors that are just more open to it than others, and some are just traditionally not accepting of those types of costs unless it's specifically written in their solicitation.
Yeah, I know the Florida Department of Health, even though they get their funding from DHHS, where NIH is getting their funding, they do not even allow participant incentive costs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Erica added, a PI just told me my participant incentive isn't another direct cost. It's for participants. So we are constantly explaining this difference. We get you, we understand. Yeah, and it's the terminology. It means something different to the person you're talking to everyone. So it's all about getting people on the same page, using those moments as teaching moments, and explaining it, because it's not, sometimes it doesn't sound like the way, how it is. It's misleading. So we have to take that extra 5 minutes and say, okay, let's break this down. I think we're out of time. I think we're over time. I want to thank you all so much for participating with us. It's been fun. A little, jive session, binge session, what have you. Thanks again for joining us. Your next session is at 1. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your time at FRAC. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.